I was, as I said in my email, careless and not checking the time when they sent the agenda out, because I do an agenda, but I didn't put a time on it. And it was sent out for 7:30 instead of 7. Um, I want to welcome everybody back. Hopefully we won't have too many more of these rectangular meetings, and we'll be able to meet in person soon so we can avoid all these other issues. Um, in the last 2 weeks, obviously, I'm sure you are aware, the Planning and Zoning Commission rendered a decision on the application. I really hope everybody had a chance to um, read the application. It was lengthy at 100 and some odd pages, but it contains an excellent history of zoning and zoning in Woodbridge in particular. But I will tell you that some of the regulations and some of the issues are not just alone in Woodbridge. It's in other zoning regulations. So the commission last Monday rendered a decision. That decision is different than what the applicants were asking for. Uh, and I was reading an article in the Hartford Courant about it, and it ended with the fact that they expected the applicant to take other legal steps addressing it. But what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Mary Ann to explain what what the decision was and how it differs from the application that was made, because it does have an impact on what we do. Mary Ann, are you there on the phone? Or? Oh, she was. Maybe she's having trouble with the phone too. Well, first of all, has everybody had a chance to read? Huh? Has everybody had a chance to read the application?
Yes.
That was done, and I don't know if you've had a chance to review the decision, but the chairman, I guess he constructed and discussed at the May meeting an alternative to what was being applied for.
Dominic,
And, yes.
Dominic, Mary Ann is on.
Oh, she's on now? Okay. Now we can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So first, a couple of things. Please keep in mind that the application, it was 145 pages and included a lot of information, but it wasn't the job of the planning of the TPZ to dispute any of that information. So that is just the applicant's version of the facts in Woodbridge. So I think it's important because some of the information is, of course, objective, but some of it was subjective. So that's just one point I want to raise first, because I think you will want to, as a study committee, to gather your data and to use verifiable information. So that's number one. Number two, the TPZ had the benefit of a consultant who digested the entire application and came up with some recommendations. And then what Rob was discussing at the meeting, it was just this Monday that the decision was made. He basically simplified what the choices were for the commission members. But this document that the consultant prepared, which is on the webpage, it framed many of the issues and the choices and was used as the guide. So it wasn't just Rob coming up with these choices. I just want to make that also very clear. And then what Rob did was try to figure out where the consensus was, because there were very different opinions on aspects of the proposal. So what did Open Communities apply for? They applied for multifamily affordable housing in every residential zone. That's all 5 of your residential zones. And the mechanism was going to be a zoning permit. That's what they proposed, which would mean that the TPZ would have no review authority. So they would, if the application was approved, they would be able, anyone would be able to come into Woodbridge, propose multifamily housing in any of the zones, the residential zones, and just, go in with the zoning permit process, which is obviously, well, Chris can tell you in more detail what that is, but that is a much different process from going to the TPZ. So what the TPZ did was they took apart what was being asked, and they looked at the soil conditions throughout Woodbridge, and most importantly, they looked at the watershed areas throughout Woodbridge, and they relied on reports that the consultant submitted about the necessity to protect the watershed. And that's not the only reason for the decision, but that is one of the biggest reasons, because this would mean then that without these protections in place, that water supply issues could have been affected townwide. So that was, I would say, the central concern. Although there were many others that the public raised, there were many others that Attorney Herbst raised on behalf of his clients. But the watershed issue is very important. So what the TPZ ended up doing was going sort of category by category for accessory dwellings. They weren't permitted in all zones, and the TPZ decided across the board all 5 zones their accessory units would be allowed with a zoning permit. So that was one thing. And again, this is designed to open up Woodbridge to some more types of housing opportunity, because accessory dwellings generally would be available at a lower cost and throughout these residential districts. And then they looked at the 2-family dwelling units, and they decided that if there was water and sewer, then the 2-family, and it could be with or without an affordable housing unit, could be allowed by zoning permit, except in the A zone, where a special exception would be required. If there wasn't water and sewer, then it was by site plan. And Chris, feel free to jump in at any point if you'd like. The next major category was multifamily. And again, Open Communities wanted multifamily everywhere in town, all 5 residential zones. But the TPC decided that there should be that only the areas with water and sewer, or areas where the developer proposes water and sewer, would be appropriate for multifamily housing, and a special exception would be required, except there would be no multifamily housing in the Zone A that's subject to the watershed. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, you're doing a great job. Keep going.
Okay,
One
so
thing,
again,
Marianne, this is Dominic. One thing, and I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but could you explain to the members of the committee, what are the areas in town that do have sewer and water?
You want me to
actually,
take that
Chris
one,
did.
Marianne?
Or Chris,
would-
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the places that have sewer and water are what we call the residential D and residential C and residential BB zones. These are basically down in what we call the flats, because it's geographically flat. There is a potential to link into public sewer and water in residential B, which is a small area up Brookside behind Brookside Market. And so those are the basic areas where we're talking about the potential for multifamily housing. The bulk of the town is what we call residential A. And when we talk about public water supply watershed, what we're talking about is where it's on a public water supply watershed, which means when it rains, it feeds into a reservoir or an aquifer. When it's off the public water supply watershed, it is not feeding into a public water supply. And so that's the difference. So there is a map, which is part of the package that was adopted, which clearly explains what those areas are. And tomorrow I will send you the exhibits, which are the parts that tell you the changes to the zoning regs, including that map, and the changes to the town plan of conservation and development. I'll probably also send you the motion because I think that's a good background for you, because you can't just read the application in a vacuum. You really need to see how it processed through planning and zoning. Okay.
And Mary Ann, one more question. Did they define multifamily by any density restriction?
So multifamily is 3 or more residential units. There's a few other things that are important. The TPZ also enacted the maximum density, and they used 15 units per acre as the maximum density in all zones, except for the A with the watershed. That's because it isn't allowed. And then they added in, right now there's a maximum building coverage requirement, but they also added in a maximum lot coverage, which is basically the concept of counting up the impervious coverage. So maximum building coverage is just that, buildings. Your maximum lot coverage, or sometimes referred to as impervious coverage, is your buildings plus your driveway, anything that isn't your, basically your natural ground. And I'm sure Chris, being a wetland specialist and soils, she could probably give you a better definition. But anyway, that's pretty much, or if you have tennis courts or any improvement that is not pervious, the water can't seep, go through the grass, can go through grass, but it shoots off of the pavement and so forth. So what they did was they took the building coverage, and then they just increased it by another 25%. And that's how they came up with that. And that was, again, important for protection of the watershed, because the watershed is just not in A. It's other places too. So that's, and then there was some tweaking of some of the concepts that Open Communities had proposed for an affordability plan and for a fair housing marketing plan. They were very vague. So the consultant had suggested a number of changes to really make sure that the health and safety of everyone was well protected. And then the TPC accepted those recommendations from the consultant. So there's, I think it is important to read through the motion, because it goes step by step through the analysis of, well, procedures and analysis, I should say. But you'll also see that this was designed as, as an initial step to provide some housing opportunities now, consistent with what was applied for, not everything, and then to allow the study committee to do its work and to think about what other changes might be necessary. And there's one other really important point, and this was stressed by Chairman Klee throughout the proceedings. So the public raised concerns, Attorney Herbst raised concerns, the TPC members asked questions and raised some concerns, and the applicants were given an opportunity many times to propose some modifications. And their response was, no, we're not going to change anything. You either accept it or you don't accept it. So the TPZ was put in the position where, by law, it has the ability to make reasonable changes, but it was certainly, it certainly would have been a better process, and this is what they were looking for, more of a dialogue. So normally an applicant proposes something and the commission makes some comments, and then there's changes, and there's some give and take back and forth. But that did not happen here. So I think that's also important, because a lot of these, I've read the articles too, and a lot of these facts are really not being disclosed in the newspaper articles. The reporting on what the decision is very accurate, but some of the background, I think, you'll see more background in the motion. So that's kind of the whole story.
Yeah, my 2 cents on they're not proposing alternatives or having a discussion. In some cases, that's sort of an indication that their next step is to take this to the court system and see if they can create a Mount Laurel type situation with the courts. But that remains to be seen. It's not our job to do that. It's our job to understand what they did and incorporate what happened into our discussion and our going forward. Does anybody have any questions for Mary Ann about the decision or what the lay of the land is right now on alternative types of housing in Woodbridge?
Yeah,
So this is what,
I'm sorry. In terms of the 2-family units, I thought that they were allowed in watershed public water supply through special exception.
Mary Ann, did you hear that?
Yes. I said except where it was zoning permit for the 2-family, when served by public water and sewer, and in all the districts except the A, which is special exception, and then if not served by public water and sewer, it's a site plan.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, it's special exception for both. Yes. For 2-family, yes. But it's not permitted at all for multifamily in the watershed.
and it's my understanding, this is Buddy, that the accessory dwelling units, those have to be occupied by family members, correct?
Chris, is that true? I'm not aware of that. I don't have
Buddy, it's an
regulations in front of me.
accessory
I have to
dwelling
go back.
unit. They don't have a requirement on it, whether it's family or not. I don't believe, but let me check my reg.
Yeah,
Because they just increased the size, I believe, right? It was 600 square feet before.
No, they did not
No,
address
they
the
didn't.
size. What they did is they made accessory units available all over town. Previously, it was in residential A, and I believe residential BB and B. But now they've included residential zone C and D. So every residential zone that's purely residential has the ability to have an accessory apartment. One thing that they discussed in the course of this was the size of an accessory dwelling. And it may be because what they did is they have an effective date for these regulations of September 7th, that in the interim between now and then, they can revisit the zoning regulations on their own and address, if they so desire, increasing the size of the accessory dwelling.
Chris, is it required, I got to remember from the regs, is it required that the accessory units that are permitted right now, do they have to be attached or can they be detached?
Currently, they have to be integral with the house.
Okay,
There will potentially be a difference in that, in what the governor, I don't know that he signed it yet, may have effective on October 1st.
right.
Right.
And if you,
To my knowledge, he has not signed it yet,
Right.
but it's passed both houses.
and if you drive around Woodbridge, there are numerous, if you look, there's one, 3 houses down from me, there are numerous detached garages with apartments over it. I'm assuming, and I hope they,
The one that's down the street from you currently has been told not to be occupied because it currently does not comply with our regulations.
okay. But anyway, so anybody else have any more questions of Marianne, Elaine? Elaine, I think you're muted.
Okay,
Yep, you're okay.
so I'm trying to clarify in my own mind, do accessory units do not require a public hearing, is that correct?
That is correct. They require a zoning
A
permit.
zoning permit. What about multifamily?
Multifamily, where it would be allowed would be by special exception. Understanding that multifamily means 3 or more dwelling units.
Okay. And what about duplexes?
It does require, it does require a
Duplexes,
public
if it's a
hearing, special exception.
two-family, are allowed by zoning permit in those areas that have public water, public sewer. In residential A, when it's not on a public water supply watershed, it's by site plan, which goes before planning and zoning. And if it's on a public water supply watershed in residential A, it's by special exception, which requires a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, I think you're not, are you muted?
No?
Oh, now yeah, we can hear you. Oh,
No, yes, okay.
okay,
Just wanted to mention that because I was looking into these things today, I downloaded the town's zoning regulations and I converted them to Word so I could search in them. And so if anybody wants that as a tool, I'll be happy to send it out.
You have to understand that those regs are going to be updated and changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Good to know where we are now, though.
let me ask another quick, noticed, and again, I don't rely on articles that are in the paper, but either maybe Marianne or Chris can, I think somebody in, one of the commission members raised the issue about comparing with respect to some of it, and I'm not sure what it was related to. He was comparing a single family to a two family, and some of the restrictions that apply to the two family, why don't they apply to the one family? And I'm not sure if he was questioning it in the watershed areas, but I'm assuming that a single family in the A zone is just simply going in and getting your simple certificate of zoning compliance or zoning permit.
No, it
to
is
construct
not.
it.
In the
It's not.
residential A, it will need a site plan review if it is not on a public water supply watershed. And it needs a special exception if it is on a public water supply watershed. And the commission very specifically did that because a zoning permit leaves to the zoning enforcement officer a call of making whether it needs to go before the health district or the water company. And the commission wanted to make sure it had the ability to bring in either one or both, depending on where the property was located. And that's why they kept in residential A, which is the larger lot sizes, either a control or a review under site plan or under special exception, which requires a public hearing.
Well, yeah, but my question was,
about
somebody was,
single
yeah,
family. Single family,
Yeah.
right. So single
Right.
family it does not require TPZ review. So Chris, you're right about the, but
Yeah,
the question was
yeah.
directed, yeah.
My question was directed to
Yes, Right.
the
So what
situation.
happened was- Yes. So some of the commissioners throughout the process said, well, we shouldn't be treating some of these housing opportunity concepts in a different way than we treat single-family homes. So it did appear to me that the TPZ is going to take a closer look at some issues that possibly may become more regulated in the zoning regulations. For instance, someone brought up the issue of garages, and that issue was dismissed on the basis, well, we don't force single-family homes with multiple cars to put their cars in a garage, so it isn't fair to put in a provision about garages in the housing opportunity. So that's where that issue was coming up. That that at some point there's a fairness principle. If some of these concepts apply, for instance, the watershed, that to some of the larger houses in Woodbridge, that perhaps you might need some regulations going forward, that deal with single-family homes. But that was just tossed out there as an issue that they may look at in the future.
Any other questions about the application or the approval and where the TPZ is going from here? I have one of the comments I have, when you're looking at what we referred to last time as middle housing, meaning that housing between these 4 or 5 bedroom single family colonial and the high-rise multi-family, all the different kinds, whether it be 2-family up to quads, or if you read the interesting article that Chris sent out on Haddam, which was not an affordable proposal, but was a 50 some odd unit apartment with 3 buildings on septic. I think it's going to be up to us as we go forward to identify what places in town these things can be done. Because, and I agree with Mary Ann, the 100-page application and its facts, what was not written as a non-adversarial piece of literature. It was adversarial. It was dedicated to point out, many issues. And like I said, I believe honestly, with the intent on eventually being in court and trying to create a Mount Laurel situation for Woodbridge. But I do think it's necessary for our committee to point out one thing. There is not a lot of open land that is not in the A area in Woodbridge for development. And as a committee, we have to study where we're going forward. And I think we need to open up and have a discussion on the fact that there is a single piece of land in the town that can be on our agenda to look at as we go forward for both affordable and other types of housing. And that is the Woodbridge Country Club, which is 140 acres of property that has sewer and water, and that is on basically just slightly off a main road, meaning whatever the number is, 243 Fountain. There is a petition circulating, at least according to the Woodbridge Town News. There is a petition circulating for people to sign and attempt, and I don't think from a former town council's position, I don't think they can force a referendum on it, but I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the charter or the ordinances with respect to it, to force the town to just keep the clubhouse and turn it and try to find somebody as a catering hall to run it and lease it to a catering person and to make the rest of it open space. So I think part of our agenda is we need to be able to look at it. We need to be able to look at the amount of open space in town, and we need to address the issue of whether or not that is a parcel of land at 140 or 150 acres that is available for whatever we come up with. And I actually went back and forth in my own mind. It's, you know, I think we need to go forward and try not to be that controversial, but on the other hand, we can't put our head in the sand. Because when Mary Ann and Chris were talking about, for instance, where multifamily is allowed, and I need to read, I do need to read the consultant's report, but I really don't know how many parcels of land are on there that would even be fit for multifamily, especially with the type of units per acre restriction. So I really would like to hear what the other members of the commission feel about it, because I don't think, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's another piece of land of any substantial size that has sewer and water in it.
In the residential D zone, there is for that area, large partial, it's a triangle behind where the gas station is, and it butts up to the Merritt Parkway or Parkway, whatever you want to call it at that point. It has been purchased. The last I knew, the developer who purchased it was going forward with doing what zoning currently allowed, which was duplexes on a road. But given changes in the zoning regs, if they are not appealed, that could change. One never knows.
How would that be accessed? It's interesting.
Off of Merritt.
Off of Merritt, okay. All right, well, does anybody else have any other questions or comments about either the approval or the issue of the Woodbridge Country Club and other large parcels of land, or is anybody else aware of any?
I'm not aware of any either, but, you know, one thought is, you know, possibly in the C and D zone down in the flats, you know, maybe there's property owners, you know, or properties that could be redeveloped, you know, maybe some older buildings on the larger parcels, you know, that could be redeveloped into, you know, affordable housing. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's right. And Chris, the on either side of Bradley, those are already approved for development, correct? Either side of the road at the corner of Bradley and Litchfield?
There is an approval in place for both that's been, I think it expires in 2022, for an active adult plan development. Under the current regulations, which were changed when the brewery was coming forward, which is now no longer on the table, the regulations were revised and allowed to have active adult plan development on less than 10 acres with no retail component. So the other thing that you might see there is that type of development on either side. But currently, the plan that's still in place is for active adult plan development with retail on the bottom floor on the south side of Bradley.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about that or those issues?
How big what did we say the property behind the gas station was?
I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but it's, for the area, it's a substantial parcel.
Thank you.
That's probably in a flood zone, Chris, though, I'd guess, because it butts up to the river.
Not all of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I would probably say
being
it's,
in a flood
it's,
zone doesn't mean you can't build. It just means you
Yeah.
have to build up.
Right.
I think it's probably, I can't imagine it's much more than 15 or 20 acres.
It's not
Yeah.
that big.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a
Chairman-
relatively small.
Chairman, I would like to just offer my support that the Woodbridge Country Club, you know, property absolutely needs to be used for multi-housing. It seems to be particularly when we're looking at the needs of Woodbridge. And I think about, the like 3 people on my street who were aging out, and they would have loved to have moved into a development in Woodbridge. And 2 ended up, moving to Orange. I think the other one moved to Branford. But we have to start looking at the needs of our demographics and the fact that we are an aging population where there's older people in Woodbridge that need to have options. And we're going to lose that population. So to have a development that addresses all the options between an active adult community to young people having starter homes, affordable home ownership and affordable housing. I think that's, to me, it's just a really no-brainer to put that at the Woodbridge Country Club property, and you still have enough acreage there for open space. It could be a really, really nice, I think, community setting that can make everybody happy.
I would agree that we have to consider the country club property. When reading the petition, we're made out to be horrible people, and I don't think we are, but I think if we ever did put a catering venture on that property, it's going to look very bad. I mean, the traffic that it's going to bring in and everything else, it's going to look like we are racist as they paint us to be, which I don't, which isn't true, but.
And
If I could, Chairman, I'm sorry, it's Nicole. I do agree we have to look at the Woodbridge Country Club property as well. I mean, I think it's Buddy that mentioned last meeting that there's approximately, or somebody did, 3,200 units or in the residential units in the town right now. Only 40 at this point qualify as affordable housing. I mean, that leaves us with 280 units that we have to come up with, because doing the numbers, I'm not a math genius, but we're looking at about 280 affordable units that we have to come up with for state mandate. And let's say we are lucky and able to squeeze out 40 units in these residential areas discussed here. As I forget who it was just was speaking, somebody indicated that we have that area behind the gas station, which has already been purchased, so that ship has sailed. And then we have the property on either side of the Bradley and Litchfield Turnpike that just was discussed. So at best, if we were able to somehow come up with 40 units in those areas, we're still left with a substantial amount of units that we still have to make up for. And we cannot ignore the fact that the only property that seems to be available at this point in time is that substantial amount of property, as you indicated, Dominic. And I think that, the town has to acknowledge that and realize this is the position we're in. And as indicated by Kathy, there is enough space there that we can still utilize open space there as well, but we just have to do it. That's just the way it is.
that's true. I do think we also need to as one of the things I have, I think a little farther down the agenda, whatever, is it would be helpful for us to know all the open spaces that are in town, which ones are restricted and which ones aren't. Most of them are restricted. And if they're not restricted, like for instance, and I may be wrong on this, the Fitzgerald, I think the cornfield is called the Fitzgerald parcel. And the Fitzgerald parcel, actually, when I did some research on it related to a prior matter that I was involved in, that parcel was actually not restricted. It was actually for government buildings, but it's a developed use for the cornfield, for the walking trail, for the gardens and everything like that. Other ones like I can't think of the name of the preserves along it begins with an E, along Peck Hill Road. Elderslie. There's large areas of those are restricted open space. So it will be helpful to us to know what we have in open space. And because when we address that, because there are two things I'd like to point out and get your opinions on. Well, number one, well, actually three. Number one, when we're talking about affordable housing, there's a wide range. I sent out some stuff for you. Hopefully you got a chance to take a look at it. I sent it out for a reason, because when you are asking someone to do an affordable unit, you are asking them to restrict it for 40 years in some fashion. And in certain circumstances, the smaller your economies of scale that you have, the harder it is sometimes to make it economically feasible. The larger you have, the more units you have, the more a lot of times the developer is able to then create economies of scale to do 10, 15, 20% voluntary affordable and lock it in when you have large numbers. That's number one. Number two, when you read through those 100 pages and you read through some of the comments and you read through everything, it really, really galls me to hear everybody talk about children, school-age children, as the equivalent of having nuclear waste in your town. You know what I mean? The fact that we don't want school-age children in town. And the fact is that many multifamily, the biggest generator of school-age children are the 4 and 5 bedroom colonials, not multifamily. And three, multifamily, high density multifamily, we need to do the evidence on this, can be economic development. But in order for it to be economic development, it's got to really have some sort of scale to it. So those are three comments, and when you're looking at what what our goals are and where to develop it, we need to look at where we can develop it, and we also need to look at the fact that, and somebody I forget who made the point, the fact that a lot of these people who want to downsize, who want to stay in Woodbridge, don't necessarily want to go into an age-restricted community. They're finding, a lot of developers are finding they prefer mixed generational.
Yeah.
And mixed generational with lesser bedroom counts are what are becoming popular. But hopefully what I sent out to you, especially the thing where you get an idea of the difference in the rents, which of course can also explain to you the difference in the economics of a developer doing an affordable housing unit. But does anybody have any questions about those things or about the statutes or anything that I sent around?
I just want to add that there are, subsidies, federal subsidies that could, assist, somebody who wanted to do an affordable unit.
Yeah.
You could have a federal subsidy, a home program that the state runs that would make it economically viable to house somebody at 60% AMI.
Uh-huh. So moving on to some of, I guess there's two things. And maybe I should address the first question to Chris. Chris, is there any indication when the town hall is going to start allowing committees and commissions to meet in person?
We've been told that the town hall may open on July 1st, but that's dependent on what the governor's orders are. And so potentially in July, there will be meetings in the town hall. It depends on how many people, so that people can be safely spaced apart. There are other buildings that have buildings or meeting space, like the cafeteria over in the center building or the auditorium. So depends on, how big a glass we've got to fill in terms of people.
Uh-huh. And just for everybody that's on the committee here, is there anybody that is uncomfortable at this point with meeting in person? If that were to come up in July or August?
No.
That's fine.
Good.
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Are we restricted from doing so? So for example, if we break up into committees of a smaller number of folks and people wanted to meet at somebody's backyard, would that be acceptable, or are we limited because we're a town whatever.
I believe we're governed by FOI. I do have a lawyer friend who's more of an expert than I am, but what I usually do when it's an FOI situation, I pick up the phone and I call the FOI. They're very helpful on it. I believe we're governed by FOI, and we have, given the number of people, we don't take action. We're a committee. At this point, we're not taking any action. We're a study committee, and I'd have to do that. If we broke up, and if your meeting is not a quorum and you're reporting back to the committee, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I will tell you this, I will call up to FOI and double check on that.
Because otherwise, I don't see much point in having committees. I mean,
Yeah.
subcommittees, because we couldn't meet separately.
Right. And I think, we will be able to. The only question is whether you need to publish the fact that you're meeting. But I gotta check on that. That's it. You certainly could have the meeting and you could publish it, but I will check on that. But that leads us into, I made some suggestions for types of subcommittees and structures, because I think it is a lot easier for smaller committees to do it and then to report back. Anybody look at that, or are there any other issues, or are some of these you think unnecessary? Do you have any other suggestions?
Dominic, I do want to mention one thing. One of the charges of this committee is to address creating a housing plan, which is due by next July.
Right.
Yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with with the Regional Council of Governments, and they raised the point that Woodbridge supposedly, along with Bethany and Brantford, had a grant and were pursuing their own having that done. I wasn't familiar with that, so as soon as we finished the Zoom meeting, I got a hold of Tony upstairs, and indeed the town currently does not have a grant for that. So I called back the Council of Governments, and long story short, they've checked and gotten back to both Beth Heller and to Tony Genovese, our finance director, and the Council of Governments is going to, more likely than not, let the town of Woodbridge be under the umbrella of 12 other towns in the municipal area of the Council of Governments, where the consultant that the regional council has hired will prepare an individual plan for each town. So that component will more likely than not be addressed by that group. What's coming up very shortly is they're doing, because there's a time frame on this, a questionnaire will be available and be going out towards the end of July. And they want all the municipalities to review that questionnaire and make sure that it is tempered toward what the town wants for questions. So there is a kickoff at the beginning of July, and as soon as that as soon as I get back to that one, I will give you all that information, and as soon as that draft questionnaire is available, that's something that a subcommittee or this committee is going to have to review and see
What's
if the
the
questions are
purpose?
appropriate, because what they're looking at is a time frame of having it go out at the end of July and having it come back by the end of August.
What's the purpose of the questionnaire? Is this the community value statement generational?
No, this is towards that report that the town is required to produce by July of 2022. It's the housing plan itself.
I'm a little concerned about sending out a questionnaire during the peak vacation time, especially when that peak vacation time is post-COVID lockdown, and people are going away in the summer like crazy. So how do they intend
We
on?
don't have any option. That's when the Council of Governments people are doing it.
Oh,
And so
okay.
we have
So
to
who
be
are they-
able to, I'll be talking to Betsy Yagla to see what information we can get out there. This is something that they should be able to do electronically as well as in paper form. So it shouldn't
Okay.
matter whether you're away on vacation, sitting on the Cape on a beach or wherever, you should be able to do this survey. But the first thing
Okay.
we have to do is let people know that it's going to be coming and they need to look for it.
To whom is it being sent?
I'm sorry?
To whom is it being sent? Is it for the public? Is it for the
It's for
town?
the public to respond to, but the initial, before it gets sent out to the public, it will be available for, like, your committee to review and make sure that the questions that are on it are what you think that this town needs to have answered. So one of the questions that you may want inserted may or may not be about the potential use of the country club.
Okay.
So this would be a questionnaire similar to the one that Bethany sent out. Is that
It would be-
correct?
Yes, it would be.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and Chris will be,
The aim of the Council of Governments is to have their report done by late spring so that the towns will be able to have their report in a sense turned in a timely fashion. They have been charged, this group that has been hired to do this, with creating those individual town plans that will meet the statute requirements. And that plan is not stagnant. It has to be updated at a minimum every 5 years. So at least it gives you a starting point, and in a year, if you want to go back and revise it, you can do that. But at least it gives you something to start with.
okay, well, I mean, obviously, that's going to be a job for us to take a look at the questionnaire and comment within July. When did you say they expect to get the questionnaire to you? Before the beginning of July?
No, the beginning of July, they're going to have a kickoff, and then they're going to outline the whole process for getting this regional housing plan done, which includes the individual components for each town. And then mid-July, they should have the draft questionnaire able to go out. So by the end of July, that questionnaire would actually be going out to the public. And it would
What's
be
their
going out
definition of
to all the municipalities for which the consultants would be doing those reports.
what's their definition of a kickoff? Are they having a?
They're not having a party, no.
No, I
It's gonna
meant, are
be-
they
it's
having
gonna
like a
be
Zoom?
via Zoom, and it's
Zoom.
gonna be basically to just outline what they're gonna be doing within the next 12 months.
So are they going to do
Okay.
like meetings too? Are they going to do things like they're doing in the Fairfax County? Where,
I don't know what's in Fairfax County.
well, when they have, they sponsor Zoom meetings so that members of the public can ask questions about housing issues.
They haven't provided that information yet because there hasn't been a kickoff yet. So once there's that kickoff, I will get more information on that.
Okay.
The Bethany one came by mail. I know, but how much time were people given to fill it out?
Bethany's closed yesterday.
That's
What
2
we,
weeks ago.
what I heard was that they want a 3-week return.
Okay. My concern was, and I guess that answers my concern that, you know, as Dominic said, people may be on vacation, but, and you can't fill it out on the beach if you're not home to get it, but 3 weeks should work.
Yeah. Well, we can look forward to that in setting up our meeting. For other topics for possible subcommittees, and we don't have to form them tonight. One of the things I raised is, and this may be related to what we're talking about, if they have this, if it's in the South Central regional planning area, do we want to try to gather information from other communities, more so than just reading articles about what they're doing, but I mean to deep down into where they have really gone into affordable housing. And I'm talking about targeting communities that are more like Woodbridge than, you know, it's, for example, you can't really compare Woodbridge even sometimes to either Orange or Shelton, simply because they have advantages that we don't have. We don't have Route 1, we don't have Bridgeport Avenue, we don't have the ability to, well, forgetting about the country club. We don't have the ability to put large apartment complexes, luxury apartment or affordable complexes where you have an Avalon complex that has 250 units and has, a third of that affordable. We don't have really the land for that other than the Woodbridge Country Club site. So do you think it's worth trying to get a subcommittee to search out other communities and get more information from those communities that are similar to ours?
I think that exercise is very useful. I was just looking at, and I know it's not a good, comparable town, but Town of Stratford just approved their housing affordable plan, and it was actually prepared by Mr. Chandler from that served on the P&Z Commission. It was a very well done plan, and even though Stratford's just very different from Woodbridge, there were some strategies in there that could easily work in Woodbridge. So I think it's good to just review plans and take out what instead of recreating the wheel,
Yeah.
look through and see what could actually work in Woodbridge. For example, I didn't realize that if you have a unit that's not that you're renting out and somebody comes in with a rental voucher, I always assume that in order to count towards the 8-30G list, that it would have to be a project-based unit using a voucher, but you could actually count a unit if the tenant has a voucher and you wanted to rent it out to somebody who had a voucher. And I think for Woodbridge, you actually could go 120% of the fair market rate. So these are different ways that you could count towards the appeals list, as well as, and I think I said this before, it had strategies to help homeowners get chattel mortgages and USDA backed mortgages, because there are affordable homes. There's a couple of them in Woodbridge. That's how OCA picked up their house, because it was affordable. And they're out there, and there's not many, but there are some. And if we could just be proactive in trying to market these units, you could work with the New Haven Housing Services that's actually head up by somebody who lives in Woodbridge. Then there's other ways of getting to the number we need to do, and it doesn't have to be strictly by a multifamily development.
If I could just add to what Kathy just was saying, I've brought this up at meetings, I think mainly at TPZ, and I know someone brought it up here. I think a town like Salisbury, albeit they are tucked away in the Northwest Hills, I think that we should be seriously looking at their affordable housing plan as well, because the characteristics of their town in terms of the land is very similar to ours. So I think we should look at that town. And another thing I wanted to point out is, prior to the questionnaires going out to the town, I think it's imperative that our committee, and I know that I think this is one of your subcommittees, Dominic, that you want to create, but I think it's imperative that we define what affordable housing is before that questionnaire goes out, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there as to what affordable housing is. They need to know what we're talking about number-wise. The rents for affordable housing is not what they think it is. So I think that we need to be perfectly clear before we send the questionnaire out, because we know, based on comments that I'm sure you all have heard as well as myself throughout town, that people are under a misconception. So I just would like to point that out.
Hi, this is Debbie. I just wanted to chime in really quick and just agree with Nicole that I think the communication aspect of this study, of this project over the next year or so, is going to be really important, so that the residents understand the definitions, that we all understand all the different definitions and the opportunities that lie ahead. And we want to mitigate any incorrect responses because of people not understanding what the questions are and what the information is.
Yeah, we talked about it last meeting. How do you think, what is the best way to communicate those thoughts to people, because I think that's really the central wonderful thing that we could possibly do is address some of those misconceptions, because I hear them all the time. But how, what is the best means of communicating?
I mean, I kind of think it could be multifaceted, where there could be an article in the Woodbridge Town News with all the definitions. There could be an article shared to some of the community Facebook groups about what's going on in other towns and what has been successful in other small towns. So I think you have to hit it on a couple of different levels and a couple of different ways, because everybody takes in the information differently, and some people are starting perhaps already thinking this is going to be great, we need this, and some people are already starting from the aspect of I don't want this. And so we want to make sure the information is clear and unbiased, so it can be people can cut through the fog.
And I think the easiest way to just tag on along with those thoughts is also, like you said, multifaceted, but to attach in the letter, attach to the questionnaire that specific information as well. I mean, we want to write an introductory letter as to what it is that we're doing. And I think those definitions are key before anyone answers these questions. Because again, misconceptions, that's going to
Right.
be there.
And definitions and maybe examples of a single
Link.
person, a
Yeah.
single person making X thousands of dollars per year could qualify for this type of unit and pay this much in rent. And then scenario B of a family of 4 making X dollars a year could qualify for a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. So I think those real world examples would really be helpful.
And attach links to towns like Salisbury and other towns that are similar to ours, and what their affordable housing plan looks like, and what the actual housing looks like that have already been built too. So people can get a visual.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, and we have to, and I'm conscious of this when I stand up before land use boards. When we're presenting it to the town, it can't be like, here's what affordable housing is, and you're going to be quizzed on it next week, and this is a textbook test. It's got to be, and the idea of the examples is a great idea. And if I were, and I'm not a designer, but if I were designing something, it would have the example, and there would be pictures throughout it of just what somebody said. This is the XYZ affordable apartment complex, contains 10% affordable units in such and such a town.
Yeah, it could be set up as an infographic where you have the nondescript people with the little cartoon house and the dollar signs, and sometimes an infographic really breaks it down in a simplified manner. So, for me, I'm coming to this not as an attorney, not as someone with government experience, but, everyone has their own personal background and personal opinions and experiences. So the easiest way you can break it down, I think, would be beneficial.
Mhm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we've got to overcome the thought that, we've adopted the phrase affordable housing, and much of the public has called, they just use the word low income housing.
Yeah.
They do not
Right.
understand. They do not understand that a lot of it's workforce housing. They don't
Right.
appreciate
And
that.
I think all the definitions, whether something is luxury or market rate or affordable or Section 8, I think, or low income, I think all of those different terms need to be explained, and it's nothing for anyone to be afraid of, and we should welcome these opportunities.
I mean, to give you an example, in a proposal that one of my clients was making, somebody who, was challenging it, well, why do you have to put affordable units in it? It was voluntary affordable. And their question was, well, which ones are affordable? And I said, you don't designate the affordable units. And they were shocked. I said, what do you mean? No, you can't designate them. It isn't, the affordable units are on the 3rd floor, left wing. The affordable units are a number of units that are in a project. And those units, so I mean, theoretically, you can have a 4-family or a 6-family or a 10 unit townhouse, and they're not designated, but most people don't realize that. They don't understand that it's not that. It is governed by the restrictions that you have on it, and it's whatever unit that you're in. So that's a very good. The question then, do we? And I don't think we need to do it tonight because we don't have the full committee. But going forward, clearly, a committee to. And is it one committee or 2 committees to look around at other towns, get some ideas, and delve and also develop a plan on how to communicate with the public? Are those 2 committees, 2 subcommittees, or are they a single one?
I would say
think
2
you
committees.
need maybe 1 or 2 people to work on communication because you need to get that going in July. And
Okay.
you may need 1 or 2 people who look around and come up with other things. I mean, you've got a time frame that you've got to get stuff done by, so we can't wait another month and come back and not have
Right.
gone forward with stuff.
I'm very anxious about communicating when we don't have the information ourselves yet. And we need to have a common basis of information. So if a committee goes out and gets information and digests it for the group, then the group can make its decisions about what we want to communicate going forward. But until we have the information ourselves, we don't know the questions to ask. So I suggest that we do indeed look at any other town plans that are already developed. The only one I've been able to find is Fairfield's, and that one was done in 2013, so it may not be entirely comparable. But to see where we're going, what's the end product look like? And then we know from the guidebook some of the steps that we need to take to get there. So we've got a lot of the pieces, but we don't have the data that goes in the middle. What does Woodbridge want to do? What's Woodbridge working with? And so I think we should break up into committees, and I think some of the ones that you've identified are spot on. Somebody needs to learn how to use the GIS. I don't know how to use it. If that's something that's the kind of tool we need to have.
Well, yeah, and that's important because that lands into I don't think we can develop a housing proposal in a vacuum. We need to know what are the land that, just think of our discussion tonight. How big are the parcels within these zones, for instance, that Mary Ann described, okay, and Chris described, you can have multifamily in these areas. Well, it's nice to say that. How many parcels are there? And then you have the limitation of 15 units per acre. And then you need to know not only that, but you need to know the issues of wetlands. Well, are those parcels that we're talking about, is there a 5-acre parcel, but it has 2 acres of wetlands? Does it have steep slopes? So I think we need to have that inventory in some fashion. If we're going to know, we would like to have this many housing units. We'd like to see people in this area. We'd like to see them develop fourplexes. We'd like to give them incentives. And that was a good idea. There are incentives out there to funding for developers to be able to do it. So but it's nice to come up with a plan, but then the next question is, where are they going to build? Do we have enough land to build it on? So we need to know that, we need to know the infrastructure issues are, and they were explaining, Chris was already explaining, where are the sewers? Where's the public water? Where's public sewers? That impacts your development ability substantially. It has a substantial impact upon multifamily. Doesn't have that much of an impact on 2-family. And as you can see from the Haddam thing that Chris sent out, you can actually do apartment buildings on septics. But that's great to know if there isn't any land to do it on, it's not gonna work. So, but I think that the first one, I think, does seem to be, we need to have everybody understand all the terminologies and all the plans. So what I'm going to ask you is, what what's the best way? Because we're not meeting in person, but maybe I should send out an email to everybody and ask everybody, what are the questions you need answered? What is the information you need as a committee right now, as a committee member, you need right now to go forward? What do you think you need to go forward?
So
Um,
there's a list from the guidebook that I
Mhm.
think is pretty comprehensive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Community values statement, housing needs assessment. Some of it we already have, history.
well, no, but I mean, those are, but I mean, I'm talking about the terminology.
Oh.
Does anybody have any issue with the terminology? What is affordable housing? What are the levels of affordable housing? Somebody asked last time, I forget who it was, asked, what is the area median income? What are the numbers that we're talking about? And I mean, there was some of that, Chris, there was some of that information in the application, correct? But
It's in that application, but it's also available. It's already been gathered, and I sent out links to people to look at where that information was already done through the South Central Regional Council of Governments. And I printed it out and I can scan it and I can send it to everybody. Some of it's on just 2 sheets and some of it's on more sheets, but I can send that out. I printed it and send it out to everybody.
was
Yeah.
that the information that you just sent, the information that you sent out?
I sent it out a day or 2 ago.
Yeah, was that from Partnership for Strong Community, where you click on
Yes.
Woodbridge?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that had some very valuable information, if anybody didn't, I checked on it, had some very valuable, in fact, somebody mentioned, I'm trying to think, who mentioned, I think it was Kathy, did you mention about the aging of the town?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yes.
I got that from the POCD, but
Yeah,
the Partnership for Strong Community has that information as well. And they
yeah,
have-
it had that information, and you can compare it to other towns to see
Yeah.
what are, yeah, it's very
And
interesting.
they're a great resource that really should be, they could be brought into the process. In fact, I'm meeting with the senior director of policy, tomorrow morning, and he even offered, because I talked to him about our last meeting and how it would be really good if there was a paper like a Mythbusters on affordable housing and how it doesn't decrease your property value and how it doesn't add to the school population and how it doesn't add to traffic congestion. And he offered to put, because this is what they do and they want to help us because this is part of their mission. So I could see him like, even doing an infographic, just making it very clear and understandable to people. What are we talking about? So I could, use me as a bridge to the Partnership for Strong Communities because this is what I do. Affordable housing has been my thing for the past almost 30 years. So I could be helpful with these different resources. And in terms of the plans, 'cause I do think it's very valuable for people to just kind of read through plans to get an understanding of what our charge is. I have access to I have at least a half a dozen plans that I have on file. I mean, is there a way of setting up maybe a Dropbox or a OneDrive where people could could just look at this information? I don't know if that's useful, or I'd be more than happy to just send them out, to email out to the group.
Yeah, I mean, what is the size of them? Can they be emailed out separately or even together? I mean, I can do share file. If you sent them to me, I can send them out via share file to everybody, but then again, you have to have this, the ability to open them up and print them out.
Dominic,
Yeah.
I can't vouch that I can get it done, but I can check and see if at least temporarily there might be a place on the town website where we could create a page for this committee where we could post that kind of information that Kathy's offering as a link so that commission members could go there or committee members could go there and open it. And then that way it would be all in one place for you guys to look at. Would that be helpful if I can get that done?
That would be great.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah,
Because then it's there, it's a link, and then, you know, you don't have to go searching through your emails to try to find it and whatnot. So let me talk to Betsy Yagla in the morning and see if it's something that, you know, is possible to be set up, and I'll let you know tomorrow one way or the other.
okay, so the other thing then goes to, I mean, we've talked about committees. Obviously, we need a communications committee, you know, to be able to do that, to be able to get ready to communicate with the public and ideas. But you know what? I may be thinking maybe that's a little premature right now, because I guess what Chris is saying is we need to focus on this questionnaire. We need to focus on, as Mary said, getting our information to ourselves, making sure we're up to date. And what are the questions? So I really would like if everybody could convey what at this point, I mean, there's going to be a lot of information out there, but is there any specific information that you really think you need? Anything else that you've been provided with a lot of information over the last month or so with respect to it? There's been some other stuff. Is there anything else that you really think you need, as Mary said, then to be able to step out and to be able to, within the near future, to be able to sit in front of the public and answer their questions?
I think you had a very good idea asking us what our questions are. What do we think?
Right.
Information we think we're going to need to be able to transfer to them, right?
Yeah.
As you say, what is affordable housing? You already covered some of them. I would like to have some answers to some of the questions I have about why the TPZ made some of the decisions they did. I don't get their reasoning, and I think we're probably going to have to answer some of those questions too. Maybe they're delicate, I don't know. But, you know, like why do you have to have sewer? I mean, sewer and public water in order to have a multifamily house proposal approved. I don't understand that. That's critical, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have sewer and water increases your density. However, improvements in, if somebody wants to go through the expense of a larger community septic system, the expense of it and the time frame of it, you can do that. You can actually do it. And Chris sent out the Haddam proposal. The Haddam proposals are 52 units, I believe, in 3 buildings with their own septic. So that question presents itself. The answer, sewer is a simple thing of, is there capacity? Once you have sewer, once you have public water, the density ability increases enormously. It's limited only by the water pressure that you have to deliver your water and the sewer capacity in the sewer plant. That's it.
My reaction when they turned down that aspect of the application was that they had just condemned the country club of Woodbridge property, because we're not going to get where we need to be unless we can drop these small units all over town. We're not going to be able to do it without a very large piece of property with a lot of units on it. So I was disappointed with that. I thought that they missed a chance, but that was my personal reaction.
Who missed the chance? The planning and zoning?
Yeah, I think.
Well, I don't think that I don't think that was before them. So I don't even think that was even, and I'm not, I don't think that issue was before them, because all it is a large piece of property that is zoned Residence A. That's all it is. So at some point, the town owns it. So at some point, the town's going to have to make a decision as to what it wants to do with it. And does it want to offer it to developers to develop in a certain way and say, here, we're asking for RFPs and we want this mixture of housing.
Right.
That's
I meant 2 Orchard Road. I didn't mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, that's a very interesting question, Mary. That's a very interesting issue. I don't know. We'll have to see whether they visit it, you know.
We'll advise them to do something else.
Right. I mean, you can, as,
Can I just state for the moment that 2 Orchard Road was never part of the application. It was a hypothetical example. It was not a site plan that was being submitted. And
Understood,
it happens to be on a public water supply watershed.
understood.
yeah.
But I don't think,
And
I don't
that
agree.
returns to my original question about needing more information about the basis for that restriction, because I didn't hear it. Or at least I heard other things that made me question that. That's all. I just think.
Yeah. Well, it's what I brought up before. If you have 4 2-bedroom, if you have 4 and this is a question we have to address. If you have 4 2-bedroom townhouses on a 2-acre piece of land, that was, as Chris said, hypothetically, if the thing was approved, they could have easily come in then with a site plan for that. What is the difference between that and an 11,000 square foot single family home with
With a 4-car garage.
7 bedrooms, six bathrooms,
And a swimming.
pool? And that's the question. That's the question that some people asked, you know, with respect to it. And one of the Planning and Zoning Commission members challenged it. So we've got to be conscious of that is where people are talking about it, but also, and we have to be aware of that. But I think our main focus is, rather than being critical of what they're doing, we've got to give them a pathway forward. And that's what's important for us. What is the pathway forward? Having grown up in a 2-family, I really get offended when people talk about 2 families like there's something wrong with them. You know what I mean? And although I often say to people, I don't think I turned out wrong, but some people disagree with that. But, you know, I grew up in a multifamily neighborhood. So multifamilies don't scare me. I've never thought of multifamilies as being a detriment. And but the other thing is this: multifamilies are great to bring in younger families, and if they have kids, that's great for the school system. But they're great because they make housing affordable for someone who wants to own property. So they're an investment vehicle besides being an affordability vehicle. And so, you know, those are the kind of things we need to talk about. So with respect to the interchange, and everybody needs, I'm going to send out an email to everybody and just say, please let me know what other questions you want answered as we go forward, number 1. Number 2, I think everybody needs to think of what needs to be in that questionnaire, since we're under such a time frame for that. And number 3, I'm going to ask for at least, Kathy's going to be able to provide, hopefully, the information on these other ones. So we're all going to be able to take a look at some of these other plans. Okay? And then, I don't know. I mean, Chris, what's the easiest way to be able to, I guess maybe it's the GIS. What's the easiest way to be able to identify parcels of land that are in the various zones that are still available for development? Without, I mean, not in the.
Well, I know where they are, but that
Okay.
doesn't help you. Simplest thing to do is go to the town website, and under department at the very top, there's a blue banner. It says government. When you click on that, you go into departments, you go to assessor. And on the bottom of the left-hand side, you can click on tax maps. And you put in any address that you want, and then you can zoom in and out, and you will look at all the parcels in town. And you can click on them, and it will tell you if it's vacant, it will tell you if there's a house, it will tell you what zone it's in. So it's not a complicated thing to do to figure out what's out there. And it's a very simple tool. When you can't go to sleep at night, you know, just play around on the GIS system. But
Yeah.
it's there, it's available to everybody. And the other thing that you can do when you look at a parcel, there's a line across the top and it has map layers. And when you click on that, you can bring up the aerial survey from 2016. So if you're trying to remember, gee, where in town am I? You can look at that and you'll have an idea, you'll see landmarks, but you can also click on topography and whatnot. So there's a number of layers that you can bring in that can educate you when you're looking at a parcel, what it looks like in terms of, is it flat? Is it steep? And go from there.
Chris, I have a question. I must have misread about 2 Orchard Road. I thought it was part of the
It was an
application.
example. It was not ever, there was no site plan
Okay,
approval. There were 2 applications. One was to amend the zoning regulations and one was to amend the town plan of conservation and development. And it was just a hypothetical example that they gave by using 2 Orchard. And that gave them, I believe, the ability to submit an application because they owned a piece of property in town.
So what happens to that property now?
Under what they adopted, they can't do what they wanted. So it's still allowed to be a
Well,
one-family
they can do
house.
it, they can do it.
And under the
two-family.
regulations, they could submit an application for a special exception to make it a 2-family house,
Right,
but not
Had they,
a 3 or a 4.
not a
Right,
3 or a
had-
4.
right, had they been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, as soon as the zone change became effective, they could have walked in and asked Chris for a zoning permit for the 4-family. Correct,
Correct.
Chris?
That is correct.
That's what the whole basis of it. Because they were not applying for it, they were not changing the zone to allow it to be done by special exception, in which case they might have filed a special exception application simultaneously with it. They were going to do it, and once that, if they had been approved, then they walk in the next, not literally the next day, but they walk in right thereafter and get their approval for a 4-family. So right now they have a property that they can put a 2-family on with a special exception permit.
Mhm.
Correct.
It remains to be seen. I still believe they're heading down the Mount Laurel road and they're heading to the courts. So we're going to get this information on the website. I'm going to get out I'm going to get out something to everybody and talk about maybe talk to Chris and get some more information on this questionnaire and the timing and everything like that. So the next question comes, do we need to have, or should we have another remote meeting in June, or should we target something early in July, hoping that it will be in person instead of remote?
I think it would be helpful if you set up a schedule so that like the first Wednesday of every month, you're going to meet at
Okay.
7, whether it's in person or remote.
Well, what is everybody's feeling? I mean, I can, the other thing I can do is do it via, I know summers are hard, that it's send out an email to everybody, an email blast and say, what is your preference? Like well, for instance, this month, I think June 30th is a Wednesday. And the first Wednesday, if we were looking at Wednesdays, the first Wednesday is the Wednesday after the July 4th weekend, obviously.
July
Chris, is
7th.
is the first Wednesday are there any notable town meetings, town commissions?
None that I have to work with it. For me, the first Wednesday is open. And that's the only reason I mention it, because I have no planning and zoning, no wetlands, no zoning board of appeals.
So
Open
how's
for me
the-
too.
Huh?
It's open for me too. I'm Nicole. It's open for me.
Okay.
It's good.
All right, so why don't we plan it for the first Wednesday in July, and with the understanding, I'm going to check on FOI, number one, and with also things with the understanding that we will engage in, responding to the emails and seeing what else we need before the first Wednesday in July. And then I may try to formalize these subcommittees and see, for instance, working on identifying the parcels. I'm familiar with the GIS very much. And if there's others that want to join me in working on it, because I think we need to know what parcels are available. We need to review these other plans, which we're going to have. So I'll try to send out an email to everybody shortly so we can start working towards setting up these committees, hopefully at our next meeting in the first Wednesday in July, which will be at 7:00, because your chairman will read the agenda that goes out and make sure it's got the right time on it.
So should we bookmark the first Wednesday of the month for at least through the end of the year for the next 6 months or so? I think that's
Yes.
helpful to just plug them in the calendar.
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't seem there's other holidays or things like that. So that,
If there is, we can adjust, you know what I mean? I don't think we're not a commission that's filing its regular meetings versus special meetings. All of our meetings are special meetings, basically, under the FOI, so.
Speaking of the FOI, let me just go back quite a while. The material that I think that Kathy was going to be giving to Chris to put on the website, would that be open to everybody in public or just the committee?
If it's on the website, anybody can look at it, but I'll check with Betsy because she's our website guru on how we can do it.
And it may be that we don't care about what other people seeing it.
No, because it would be all public information anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, any of the information we're exchanging amongst each other is going to be a matter of public record. And anything we generate, at some point, pretty much everything. I'm not going to say 100%. There potentially could be something that might have in a draft form that might, be exempt, but pretty much everything we do. So, do not share your secret recipe for something at one of our open meetings because it might be available to the public. And if you don't want your secret recipe out there, so. All right.
Okay.
And if there's nothing else, I'll get working on my emails. I'll get working with Chris. Kathy, you'll get working, getting that information. And Chris, hopefully you'll let us know if we can have our own little webpage on the town website.
I will let you know tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Okay.
thank you.
Have a good night.
Good
Okay.
night.
Bye.
Right.